Why, hello there, and I'm still here. I hope this video finds you very well today, and I thank you very, very much for tuning in. And by the way, you are looking excellent today. What are we doing? We're doing a review of the Kizer Phoca here. However, this is going to be a little bit longer of a video. You may have noticed that in the when you clicked on the video. Hopefully, the timestamp or the length of the video did not scare you away. I'm going to be doing a simultaneous comparison between these two, but I'm also going to be going off on probably two tangents that I will add to the timestamps, in fact. It is a review. Timestamps will be down below in the description for your convenience, so you can skip over things that you maybe don't care as much about. However, there will be some maybe extra timestamps down there this time for those, as I said, tangents that are probably going to create this video to be slightly longer. Kizer Phoca review. Let's begin with the specs. Length, about 7 1/8. This one is actually slightly under 7 1/8. It's very close, but they are slightly different. I suppose the comparison is going to start right out of the gate as far as differences. They have approximately the same amount of blade length on them, coming in at, I'm going to call that like 2.85. However, I will note that, let's see there. Yeah, the blade length seems to be very close to being the same. However, the handle is a little bit, I think, where most of the difference is. This one comes in at slightly over 4 1/8, while this one comes in like almost directly on 4 1/8. So I think that's most of the difference in size. Let's do a comparison to our resident comparison knives. I'm just going to have one of these down here because they're, like I said, splitting hairs, but there is a slight difference between them, which, for the comparison's sake, is, or comparison between the same knives is relevant, but less so for these. As you can see to our resident small Civivi Elementum and full-size Civivi Conspirator here, it's definitely Elementum sized. It's got, I'd argue, a little bit less blade length than Elementum, though, I mean, the cutting leg edge is pretty darn spot on. Even though on the camera it does look like it's a little bit longer, they're real close here. Maybe just a hair longer overall for the Phoca. It's a small knife. However, it does not feel, I should say the grip does not feel quite as restraining as the Elementum. You only really have one spot to hold on to the Elementum. This one, they've given you a little bit more room. Let's do our double A battery comparison for the grip length. Basic grips position, you have a basically 1 2/3 double A battery, while for your full grip position, you actually have slightly over 2 double A batteries. And that's kind of the difference maker. These are all very round and soft. Bumps, lumps, whatever, changes in angle, whatever you want to call it. The shape is pretty neutral, and you can grip onto it in a lot of different places. So I don't think you're going to have too much issue with gripping onto this knife, even compared to the Elementum. You kind of have a little bit more room to do it. Let's get a quick weight on both of these. As you will soon find out, they are not the same weight. 2.83 ounces, 3.28 ounces. So this one's about 1 ounce an inch. This one's slightly under that, or over that. And part of that has to do with the fact that the liners appear to be a little bit thicker on this one, and there's a little bit less weight reduction, I think, is the primary reason. It's also got like extra pins, and it's just doing some different things in there. So for some reason, if you're looking for lighter, not theoretically, it's the crossbar lock that's allowing them to do the thinner liners, but it could also be something to do with the steel. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But before that, let's get hardware check. We have, this is a T8. We have T8. T8 pivot. Yeah, we have a knife falling out of my hands. And T8 pocket clip. The tiny little thumb stud is T5. But other than that, it's T8 all the way around on both of these knives, which is pretty nice. Especially on the pocket clip. You always like to see T8 on the pocket clip. However, this is like the one knife that it wouldn't have really mattered that much because the pocket clip is not reversible, which is unfortunate because these are both pretty ambidextrous locking mechanisms. So, unfortunately, left-handed people, they did not accommodate you on a knife that really probably would have benefited from it. In fact, they didn't even inset the clip, so it's not like there would have been a milled out area. They just put extra screws there. It probably would be perfectly fine. Unfortunately, they did not do that, which is a strange choice, but sure. Sorry, left-handed people. If you exist. I'm still not entirely convinced. No, I always make that joke. I don't know why. Wait. Oh, before we move on to the next spec, one thing I want to talk about is, as you can see, there is a difference in the pivot. This pivot is tooled on both sides for some reason, while this one is captured. I have adjusted this. It does not... It seems like it's captured, because it doesn't really, like, free spin, which is odd, but for some reason it's not tooled on both sides, so I don't know if it is entirely captured. I have adjusted it, but I haven't taken it apart or anything like that. You know what? Screw it. Screw it, screw it, screw it, screw it, screw it. Let's just get in there right now and find out what it's doing in here. It is captured. It has a very... And by captured, I mean it's got a D-shaped pivot. One side's flat, so it doesn't rotate fully. Okay. Is this what I think it is? Why did they do this? Okay, so the pivot itself is D-shaped. However, neither of these screws on either end are connected to the pivot. So the pivot is just a barrel in between, while the actual knife has two removable... I mean, it's still centered. There's no play whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, it goes together nicely. So it's technically captured, but for some reason you can take the pivot screw out on either side. I mean, as long as it's captured, I don't mind, and I guess for ease of maintenance and everything, that's not a terrible idea, but the pivot barrel is not attached to the screws on this particular case. Interesting. So if you see that, you'll know that there's going to be a slight difference. Let's move on to thickness here, shall we? You're going to notice a difference here as well. 505 thousandths. With the clip, it is 690 thousandths. This particular one, with the thinner liners, is 470 thousandths, 77 thousandths, under half an inch, with 660 thousandths with the clip. So this one is also noticeably thicker. Again, it seems like the top liner lock has thicker liners, and there might be a little bit more... It's going to be really hard to see. There seems to be just a tiny bit more contouring, so the apex of the scale might be just a little bit thicker on this one. It feels like there's a little bit more contouring. This one feels like it's just a hair flatter, but very minor. However, it is. I can sort of feel a difference. Blade stock should be the same at 110 thousandths. Let's go up. Sure. Now, behind the edge is where we're going to get into our first tangent. In fact, I'm going to just mark it right here. Thanks for future me or past me for doing this. It'll be convenient. So, behind the edge on the monosteel Phoca. No, come on. Get where you're supposed to be, behind the edge. There we go. 17.5. Not super thin, but reasonable. A little thicker than it necessarily needs to be for such a small knife. However, it's not that big of a deal. It cuts pretty well. Holy crap, there it is. Yeah. 23 thousandths, 23.5 thousandths, maybe in some areas up to 24. That's a difference of .07 or point, I guess, 007. What? No. No. Yeah. Yeah. 0.007 difference. Yeah. There's a noticeable difference in thickness, and that's kind of what led me to get, as I said, this is the tangent, first of them. That's what led me to get to Phoca in the first place, to compare them. I had a Kizer Allure. I have a review of it. You can check that out on the channel. I also have a shorter summary if you want to check that out. And in that video, I talked about the Kizer Allure being very thick and not very slicey. And someone in the comments said, I'm not singling them out or anything like that, but they said that nobody else was complaining about this, that it, none of the other reviewers even seemed to mention that. Now, if they had the Damascus version, I can't tell you, but as soon as I had the Allure and got the Phoca and saw that both were pretty thick behind the edge, I got it thinking in my head, which is never a good idea. Do not make me think. I have bad experiences with thinking. But it got me thinking that it might have something to do with the steel itself. And that's why I got this plain Phoca in mono steel to sort of compare them, and lo and behold, there was a noticeable difference. I mean, you can feel it. You really can. So I don't know if it's something to do with the pattern that Kizer wants, or the way they're grinding this Damascus, because the Allure was, again, in this same Damascus. The Allure also comes in S45 mono steel. Now, I don't have a comparison for the Allure, so take this with a grain of salt. It could just be that these two are weirdos. However, it follows the same consistency. This Damascus has both times been around 24 thousandths behind the edge, and feels like it gets awfully thick, even slightly faster than its direct comparison of the same knife, basically. Now, of course, there is a slight difference in blade shape, but that really shouldn't affect how thin behind the edge they get it down there too much. Maybe up here, but basically, this one is thinner behind the edge and feels like it stays thinner just the tiniest bit longer. They get thick quickly, but it is definitely noticeable on this one. So I'm thinking for this kit to be the same as the Allure, in the Damascus itself being the issue. Whatever Kizer's doing, they seem to be grinding this thicker. So if you want a thinner, slightly better cutter knife, it seems like going with the mono steel versions of this, or, well, any knife that has this Damascus, is probably the better option. Though I will admit, the Damascus does look pretty good. It's got sort of like a dark wash, acid wash something, giving it this darkened, flat color on this Damascus. It's a budget Damascus, but not Damascus or anything like that, but it does look good. However, you will notice probably, at least my guess is, some level in cutting performance difference between having it and not having it, even on the same knife. So basically, the tangent here is, yeah, this Damascus seems to make things thicker. Pardon me. Okay. Getting back to the actual review and comparisons, you obviously have a drop point, spear pointish blade shape here, with a clip point with a higher tip here. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit more utilitarian. There are monosteel versions of this, and like I said, the Allure, if you were to specifically want something that it's going to cut better. But there are definitely monosteel versions with this blade shape. Tip axis is going to be better on this. It is lower. It is easier. You can get to the tip here. It's not going to be too bad. However, I suppose for just pure universal convenience, this does tend to be a slightly better blade shape. There is also a tiny bit of jimping out here on the tip on this one, where there's nothing here. I mean, you don't need it. You kind of got the curvature. This one, the curvature goes in the other direction, so this kind of helps a little bit. In fact, you can actually see some of the thickness difference at the tip. In my opinion, why am I over here? I don't know. Yeah, this is a little bit thinner of a blade in just the general execution of it, even though they're same stock. Moving on from that, though, we've got a plunge grind that ends about here. It definitely gives you life, and you'll definitely not have to worry. It's not too far from behind the edge, but, I mean, it does terminate just behind the cutting edge, so you'll probably be able to get some sharpenings without putting in a smile. They could have pulled that back, mind you, but it's fine. On the stop pin is, of course, the crossbar, which hits way back here. So this one you don't have to worry about cutting in if you ever have to expand this drawer, or you find that maybe on yours someone brought that plunge grind a little too close to the edge, so you've got a smile. You can definitely change it or expand the choil. This one's a little trickier. The stop pin, again, turns out to be the button, much like the crossbar lock. However, the button hits here, much further forward than here. Is it a problem? No, not in the slightest. You're never going to have to worry about that. However, if you do decide that you want to expand the choil, like I said, if maybe yours has a little bit of a weird plunge where it starts smiling out early, you just have to be very cognizant of the fact that that is not an area you want to touch with your Dremel or your file or whatever you're putting that expanded choil in. You're just going to want to move this forward without hitting right here. So just basically you have this much room to work with back there. Do I think it's going to be a problem? No. If you're careful, it's not going to be any issue. Just something to be aware of if you happen to have probably the top liner lock variant of this knife. Also, let's just take a moment, sort of palette cleanse, and just look at the clean presentation of this knife. Kizer put no branding, nothing on this blade. It is completely sterile, and I'm going to take the wins where I can get it. It looks so much better without logo and writing on it. Both have the Kizer logo here. I don't mind that. But it looks better. I admit the Damascus is probably the reason they didn't put any logos there, but just appreciate the aspects you can, right? I don't mind it. The branding on this is a budget knife. I'm not going to be upset about it, but there's just no doubt that this is just a nicer presentation. Maybe that's just me, but I'm going to keep saying it because it is me. Getting into the actual handle, now that we're past that point, as you can see, there is a slight difference in shape right here. This handle goes out a little bit further and then cuts in, while this handle just rounds off. Why did they do that? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. The thumb studs are in pretty close to being almost the exact same position. Maybe it's something to do with the angles they wanted. I couldn't tell you. But they did it. It's got a slight change. It shouldn't really affect anything, but it does result in this one seeming to be a little bit tiny hair longer, despite being a bit lighter. Blah, words. I'm going too long. I'm reaching critical mass. Ugh, jeez. All right, handle ergonomics. Surprisingly ergonomic. Back here, I can actually still get a full four-finger grip. I am wrapping around the end. I can just barely get on there. However, it is quite comfortable, and I do feel like I can get locked in there. Bigger hands, maybe you're going to have an issue. However, you can choke up. Now, I will say the choke up position, while jimped, does kind of feel like it's really kind of tossing you forward. However, in actual practice, it doesn't really, and I find that I can get my full four-finger grip on there and be locked in pretty comfortably without being on that edge. So, honestly, it's pretty neutral, at least, I mean, it's got wiggles in it, but it's a pretty rounded and softened, so you can kind of really just go where you want on this thing. That lends a lot of comfort and potential for just finding a better grip for more people. No complaints there. Depth of pocket clip is ultra deep. It is definitely going to be in your pocket, disappearing pretty well. There is a lanyard hole, which, sure, fine. It's also not, even though I guess you could say it is being prioritized over the pocket clip placement is very good in my personal experience and to my hand. It's very comfortable. You feel it, but it's very minimal. Thankfully, they did the smart thing and rounded this pocket clip and softened it all over, which it's funny that so many knives that are ultra premium using, milled clips have hard squared edges that just end up making them uncomfortable. Just round it, people. Soften, round. There's no hard edge here. It's just a complete, continuous curve. Makes it more comfortable even if you feel the pocket clip. They doing it right on some things. There is a flat on the end. Don't love seeing that, but it still works pretty well. Steel pocket clip, decent retention, good flex. Flat screws, not inset in this case, but not the biggest deal. I mean, it's not as big of a deal as the fact that it's not reversible for the ambidextrous nature, but whatever. A little bit of jimping there, a little bit of jimping there, and as I said, a little bit of jimping there. The jimping is texture. It does basically nothing. It's nice texture here to have because you know where you're at, and it's nice up here because it just feels like it keeps you knowing and understanding where you are. However, does it actually do anything? Not really. Sadly. The crossbar lock on this particular one is adjustable, though mine came in the strongest position. I don't know why you'd want to go weaker, but I suppose you can. However, this one feels a little bit better than my previous, with the more recently released but ultra budget, or it's like $40 whatever, sheepdog. That one had a very weak feeling spring in it. This one feels a bit stronger. I mean, I can still get it out, but it's definitely more in line with my experience with Kizer, where it's got a pretty decent spring in there, and feels like it snaps and carries pretty well, and it's got enough retention that it's just nice to do everything with. So good execution there. No complaints. That more or less brings us to the end of this one. As I already said, oh, well, I guess we should compare the micarta. As you can see, they use different micarta. This one is using more of the classic sheepdog micarta. Though I will say, and I've pointed this out before, the fit and finish isn't quite as good on the edges. This one is definitely, like, you can see where it's a little bit more ragged on the inside. This one doesn't have an inside because it's got a liner in there, but, well, I mean, just look at it. You can see more changes in pattern and color right along the edge, and you can feel it. This is much smoother and softer and more, like, silky just to run your finger on this change in angle. Now, I'm not saying that they've, like, lowered their quality of fit and finish, but I will say that this is definitely executed a little bit better. Of course, this has been around a lot longer, so it's had a little bit more time to break in, but yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing this a little bit more nicely rounded and chamfered. The chamfers are there, they just seem to be a little bit harsher, and that results in a slightly different look. Now, compared to this one, obviously different micarta, this is much more high thread count feeling. It's more luxurious kind of feeling. This is a little bit more tacky. However, they're both super comfortable. They're both super high quality. Kizer does use really, really good micarta for the most part on all of their knives, as far as I can tell. Maybe the $40 super budget knife versions doesn't, but I think those are in G10 anyway, so whatever. It feels good. It provides grip. And it's really nice to grip onto, even though it doesn't seem to be, for some reason, finished quite as well as this older model, which is odd, but what are you going to do? It'll probably break in and start to wear down a little bit, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. However, the handles are very nice. Now, moving into our secondary and final tangent that the review is pretty much over, I want to talk about top liner locks real fast. This is a top liner lock. It is a liner that is actuated with a button, and instead of being accessed down here, you access it up here, and it can be executed in pretty much two ways. In this case, the liner pops out and it slots over top of the tang. Basically, instead of abutting into the tang and needing an angle, it slots directly over top of the tang. Theoretically, that should make for a stronger one because you've got material on either side of the tang, or I should say material keeping it in that position and the tang pushing directly against the lock bar itself. The other kind of top liner lock, let's see, there we go. This is the Miguron Mojarl, is where it actuates the same way as a liner lock typically does, with the lock bar being flat against here, but just having a button. In this case, you can actually actuate it both ways for the Mojarl. Not Mojarl. Why am I saying that? Karak. This is the Karak. This is a super budget knife, and from what I've had so far, I'm still working on the review, but it's really good. So, why are we talking about top liner locks and different actuation methods? That is because I have noticed a theme. Again, this may be completely anecdotal, but liner locks, while that have the lock on top of the lock bar, or have the lock bar engaging on top of the tang instead of abutting it in your standard traditional liner lock configuration, while they should be stronger, they have a much higher tendency to have a little bit of button stick. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it. Whereas these ones that do the standard operation seem to have none. I don't know if this is just my experience. Let me know down below. But these have button stick. Let's pull. Here we go. Here's another one. This is the Vostede Croc. As you can see, the liner actually slots in between that area when it pops out, instead of pushing again against the bottom. And once again, there's a little bit of a hang-up. It's not bad. This is definitely a better, more premium executed knife, but it's there. There's a little bit of pop before it releases. Whereas, oh, here we go. Here's a good example. This is an even more premium knife. This is the Best Tech Wet Nelly. This one uses a button operated top liner lock attached to a, well, top frame lock, actually, where the frame is both accessible for basic disengagement and the button. But notice it's got your more standard lockup, and again, absolutely no stick. Now, of course, this is a more premium knife, so hopefully that's just okay. But basically, I just want to point out that it seems like when you put the lock bar on top of the tang, you get just a little bit more stick. This one is very, well, pretty good about it. It's very minor difference there, but you can still feel a little pop when you first just disengage it. It just has this pop, and then it disengages. Is that a big deal? Not at all. It's not a lot of button stick. It's not a problem. However, I have noticed that seems to be the difference. When you put the liner behind the tang instead of on top of it, you don't get the stick. And again, that seems to be pretty consistent. This is the Rapax Mimi. The liner, while it actually technically sits on top of this and behind, it actually interfaces two areas, so this one should be pretty strong. It doesn't have any real stick. So let me know your experience on that. Just, it seems like there's two configurations of top liner locks, and one results in very consistent a little bit of stick, while the other does not. Does that matter to you? Well, I don't know. I'm not you. But just wanted to talk about that in a little secondary tangent. So if you're looking for maybe the smoother, more luxurious feeling actuation, maybe see if you can see where the tang is on the knife before you grab it. In this case, it is on top, and you get stick from that. Let's put this crock back where it was. That's waiting for review. All right. Whew. I think I'm done. Okay, so I'll put the extra timestamps down below. Hopefully you got something of enjoyment or use of value. Maybe you'll be looking at top line locks a little differently. Maybe you'll be trying to check out this deal for yourself or stay away from it. Maybe, hopefully, it informs your purchases a little bit more in the future if you ever were thinking about these Kizer knives. Either way, it's a good budget knife. I totally forgot to talk about price. Okay, well, let's just finish it out, round it out with saying there's D2 blade steel coming in around $45. There's this AEBL and 14C28N variants. I don't know why they're two different ones, but they both come in around $65. And then there's the 14C28N with aluminum handles or the Damascus blade. They both come in around $80. There are a lot of variants. There are a lot of options. You can probably find something that suits you or that you want. There's G10, micarta, and aluminum options. So, yeah. Tons of stuff. Is it a good budget knife? Yes, it's a small budget knife, but it is good. It definitely cuts better when it's not in this steel, at least in my experience. However, yeah, the Phoca is a pretty good one. I would definitely recommend it, and I'm going to be linking it down below in, well, I'll link all three price points. Why not? just keep adding stuff down there. It'll come out eventually, right? All right. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. Sorry for being so long. Have a great day. My throat hurts from talking so much. I'm out. just out. See ya.